9 a.m. in Shanghai, Shenzhen, and here in Hong Kong, you're watching The China Show. I'm Yvonne with David Ingles.
Good morning. We're counting down to the open of markets in Greater China. Let's get to your top stories today. Korean stocks and NASDAQ futures, as you can see, jumping as the tech momentum continues. Oil is rising on the lack of concrete evidence, or progress at least, in terms of U.S.-Iran peace talks.
China's factory activity showing signs of weakness with higher input costs due to the Middle East conflicts really weighing on the official gauge.
Also ahead, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth avoids mentioning Taiwan at the Shangri-La dialogue while hailing improved ties with Beijing.
Plus, an exclusive interview with Akeso CFO Liang as the firm's lung cancer drug takes the spotlight at a major U.S. oncology conference. All right, hope you had a rested weekend, and certainly we're kicking things off on a strong note here when it comes to, of course, the equity bulls. Some more, I guess, tech headlines to really digest, right? Whether it's the Minimax news, whether it's Lenovo upgrades, whether it's everything that comes with it. So certainly there's plenty of, and even the export data that's come through in Korea continues to show that maybe there is still more legs in this whole equity rally.
Yeah, I think it was north of 50% was I think the growth in exports just for May. And so fine, if you're a bear and you say, okay, that's backward-looking data, you look at the Taiwan projection, which is, again, a similar thing, and it's the fastest growth between the two. Let's call it the split of difference in, 45 years on exports. And this is fresh set of numbers. In fact, the Korea number just came out about an hour back, and the Taiwan number came out on the weekend. So this is really playing out as far as the macro picture is concerned. And, of course, we talked about these markets, LG. Lenovo actually was interesting, too, because it's part of that. On the Goldman line, which also just came out, they, I think, upgraded their forecast there, Lenovo, too.
Yeah, by 15% in terms of that price target here. So when it comes to this whole AI PC trend, when it comes to this personal AI agent to drive growth, they say, Lenovo is probably going to be in the driver's seat and in the front row for that. So certainly that's another area of this AI trade to continue with here today. The Minimax IPO I think will be quite interesting as well, Mike. Alongside all these other, when you have OpenAI, when you have SpaceX, I mean, these are the next really big things to watch in these equity markets now.
Yeah, it follows the memory chip play in China, number 4 in the world, right? Yeah. That said it applied for a listing CXMT last week, and I think the Minimax story going back on short is going to be interesting to see, and we'll obviously watch those shares closely today as it pertains to that. We talked about Lenovo. The other big part of the conversation will be healthcare, following, of course, the big oncology conference in the U.S. And Akeso and all the data they've put through as far as small cell lung cancer is concerned. In fact, the company will be joining us today to talk us through those results. Apart from that, I think U.S.-Iran, the lack of details there. Yes, we're seeing oil prices somewhat to the upside, but at least we're not looking at two drafts. At least the direction of travel seems to be very clear. That, apart from all of that, I think when you look across the region today, there's a whole swathe of markets, of course, that are shut today. Just keep that in mind, of course. A lot in Southeast Asia are not trading today. Apart from that, not that you would need Southeast Asia on a day like today, given the tech representation there. But yes, Korea and Taiwan are all guns blazing very early, of course, this Monday. And, of course, we're looking ahead to Chinese markets as we get underway in about 25 minutes from now.
Yeah, for more, of course, on the AI trade and sort of the sustained calm across macro markets. Let's bring in our Bloomberg Anthony Stevens, as well as our Asia equity reporter Charlotte Yang. Anthony, I'll start with you. It's interesting now, right? You can still see oil markets gain, but then you can see the Kospi continue to gain too. So it seems like it's two different stories now.
Yeah, you see macro volatility staying low for a sustained period now. Right? We're seeing it, whatever measure you use, right? Treasury volatility, G7 FX volatility, EM FX volatility, oil volatility itself. Oil volatility itself is about 20 points lower than the volatility of the Kospi, right? So people are chasing upside on tech much more aggressively than they're playing for downside on macro. And that is giving people a lot of comfort to rotate through tech themes, right? NASDAQ implied correlation is multi-year lows. What that means is everything on the NASDAQ, it's doing its own thing. So you're getting paid to be brave. You're getting paid to dream about the future of tech, right? And that is a very powerful self-reinforcing dynamic. And a really good example of that is the LG Group in in Korea, which is up another 25%. After being up 25% on Friday, this is in anticipation of management meeting Jensen Huang. So this is the kind of dynamic we are sitting in now.
Charlotte, I'll bring you in. Obviously, Computex is going to be a very big one today. We talked about some of these other names in Taiwan, but the TSMC, how does the TSMC story fit into this AI rally currently?
Yeah, so TSMC is definitely the key thing to watch. But one thing that's really interesting that we just put out a story is looking at the spread. So TSMC's ADR versus the Taipei listing, which has been a key thing investors watch, since the global AI boom, as a way to gauge how foreign investor demand versus the local investors' appetite has been. And one thing that's really interesting is that we're seeing the spread declining for the 5th month, and that's now in May the average is 13.8%, as down from 26% in December. And what this really shows is that local investors has now becoming this more dominant force in pricing TSMC's valuation. So I think, and also, if you think about it, the CFO investors having profit taking in Taiwan, where local investors are becoming, taking up this active force in buying the shares. So the spread is really, the narrowing of the spread is showing a break from the previous keep elevated trend we've seen earlier.
Okay, and then there's the Minimax news as well. I mean, it's just plenty of good news to come through here. What do we know so far about this IPO?
Yeah, so far there's not much that details we know because it's still at the preliminary stage. But what we know is that Minimax has started the preparations for its domestic listing in the Shanghai stock market, following the steps of its Chinese AI model peer, Zhipu. And I think this is a sensible move for Minimax, given that it's now in this race with the likes of DeepSeek in racing, to commercialize AI large language models, and the company is still, despite its very strong growth momentum, the company is still burning cash. So it's good for them to tap into the deep funding pool of China's onshore market. So they have more, the dry powder for them to invest in models and also expansion. And I think this is also a good move for the Chinese onshore market. We've seen onshore investors obviously have insatiable demand for these cutting-edge AI companies, but there isn't that many. The more the AI pure one listed onshore, which we've been seeing those concentrations in the hard tech where, especially like optical transceivers, sort of becoming a concern.
Yeah, Anthony, so we talked about LG Electronics, 25% on Friday and a further 25%, so 50% over 2 days. The same could be said about Lenovo. How do we look at those names? These seem seemingly overheating names, but the market's not giving up on them.
For example, you see Lenovo, the price target that Yvonne alluded to, right? It's the street is catching up to the numbers that are being put out. Okay. And the street is catching up to these numbers because management themselves are being so bullish. Right? So that's a cycle here now where management guidance, the street has to catch management guidance. We saw the same thing in Dell, right? On Friday, you had 7 banks increase their price targets at the same time in Dell to above the $500 level. So there's this recurrent kind of cycle of the street is far behind the current earnings cycle. Now the debate is the earnings cycle repeatable? Is it resilient? That is a debate that has to be resolved in the coming weeks. And again, Computex is going to be a key source of guidance on that front. But what the investor base is doing now is they're comfortable taking more risk as every leg of the AI trade starts to sing the same song.
All right. Anthony Stevens, our markets reporter there. Also,
Fantastic.
thanks to Charlotte Yang, our Asia equities reporter, on what to really watch here today. So plenty of tech news to digest. Also, when it comes to the data side of things, we talked about some of the trade data coming out from South Korea, from Taiwan. The PMI numbers we got on China was on the softer side as well, which we do have to kind of decipher. A lot of it was because of that 5-day break, but certainly, maybe you're starting to see signs of this Middle East war kind of impacting on some of the data and some of the indicators too.
So I'll be interested to hear what Goldman Sachs says about this, because one thing that the PMIs from the previous month did not reflect, but then showed up in the data largely, were the export numbers for March, right? Back to the AI play.
Yes.
And I wonder where that metric might look like given the relative softness in these numbers. And there is some indication as well, looking at some of the early reaction across the street here on the PMI numbers. We'll get Rating Dog, of course, in about 30 minutes from now. What the fiscal push is seemingly starting to look like. There are signs it's becoming counter-cyclical in nature, seasonally not supposed to pick up. We're seeing a pickup in activity there. So we'll see what happens with this, of course. And all that is to say, there's a micro story to play out today. It's probably the micro that's going to win out as far as risk appetite is concerned going into the session today. Right, so we talked about tech. Macro still ahead here and shows healthcare and biotech, a closely watched drug out of China's Akeso is raising new hope in lung cancer treatments. Bernstein's Rebecca Liang joins us for her take on what's taking place there. That's coming up next. And you're watching Bloomberg. All right, welcome back. Lots to get into today. Just a brief look across these markets. So we're actually pointing higher on A50 futures, which is somewhat not very common for this time of the day. So that's quite a sizable move to discuss today. Apart from this, so we talked about, I think, Meituan earnings are coming. We'll watch out for that, of course. Apart from that, a couple of stocks. Lenovo, massive turnover on Friday, 22%, of course, on Friday. Akeso, obviously, given, of course, all the news on the weekend, coming into today, of course. In fact, just on that very note, the company's lung cancer drug raising hopes here for this new class of treatments that's statistically relevant in as far as the extension of survival from 24 to 28 months. This is according to data presented, of course, on the weekend here. And the results are fueling expectations now for this new generation of therapies that both activate the immune system by cutting off, of course, blood supply to the tumors themselves.
Yeah, it certainly is a milestone. For more, of course, of China's biotech advances, let's bring in Bernstein senior analyst Rebecca Liang. She joins us here on our Hong Kong set. So you saw what happened in Chicago. Obviously this is quite remarkable from a Chinese biotech firm, but tell us the significance of this.
Yeah, for sure. So this is the first time that any China-originated innovative drug makes the stage of the plenary session of ASCO, which is very prestigious, usually reserved for practice-changing results. And indeed, I think last night's result, the hazard ratio of the overall survival at 0.66, translating to 34% reduction of risk of death compared to standard of care, is very much of a surprise to the entire, I think, medical and investor community. Prior to this, I think most people were expecting 30% or 0.70 to be a great win already. So it was a surprise. But as we heard kind of later in the discussion session, there were still some questions to be answered regarding the baseline characteristics of the patients and just how translatable the results are to the global context.
And this goes into perhaps what the U.S. FDA specifically might need, of course, which is a different set of tests and a different data pool of patients. Yeah. Initially, my thought was, okay, they're both human beings. Why should it be different? But there's a difference in the data set as well. Just take us through the differences there.
Right. So first of all, the results we just had, entirely Chinese population, Harmony 6 trial. There is an ongoing trial called Harmony 3 that is global. So these are two separate trials.
Yeah.
And the KOL, Dr. Julie Breuer, at the discussant session last night, pointed out to some differences between the patient groups of these two trials. Mostly in China, the trials included patients that are younger, excluding those that are above age 75, and mostly included men. However, the global trial is likely to be representing a more dispersed population with older patients and including females. There's also some differences how the physicians would include patients based on their risk factor, such as how their blood vessels are forming around the tumor. So I think those are very interesting points. And more importantly, they could actually alter the commercial upside of the drug. Because imagine you're a physician in the clinic, and then you have to decide whether to put the patient on the trial. You then have to decide whether the patient is high risk or not.
Yeah.
Because historically, we see that the anti-VEGF agents typically do raise the bleeding issue in patients. So you have to be very careful. So I think with the current set of results, it's very encouraging that we're seeing brand new biology formed around the PD-1 VEGF mechanism, which does separate the Akeso's drug from the previous standalone VEGF agents. So that's for sure. But as you said, translating to the global population, the global, what the FDA will be looking at, as well as the commercial upside, we'll have more questions to answer.
Have you been able to quantify the commercial upside in terms of peak sales potential?
For sure. This is a very, it's a milestone result because lung cancer, as we know, is the biggest oncology market. Globally, it's 30 to 40 billion. Squamous lung cancer is a smaller subset, 30% of all patients. But still, we're talking about frontline treatment. So it is the biggest submarket within lung cancer. So I think for the market size alone, we're talking about 10 to 15 billion easily. So currently, Keytruda plus chemo is still the standard of care. So nothing as a single agent has come close to challenging Keytruda status. But I think at this round of ASCO, we see lots of exciting news that such bispecific agents, as well as a new class of drugs, ADCs, separately, they show potential that they could be used in the next generation IO 2.0 therapy plus ADC setting.
We'll be speaking with the CFO of Akeso in about an hour, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think we should ask him?
Indeed, I think I think the question on everyone's mind is the read-through of this trial to the more important global Harmony-3 trial.
Yeah.
And because they wanted to de-risk the trial, they separated the trial to two parts, squamous patients and non-squamous.
Okay.
And we'll actually have
Is it industry practice, by the way, to split?
It is, indeed.
Okay,
I mean, plenty of, even for Keytruda, the gold standard,
yes, that's still
historical
go-to
trials, they also had separate trials on this, for sure. So clearly Harmony-6, the one that just read out at ASCO, does have a lot of read-through to at least the squamous part of the global Harmony-3 trial. But it will be interesting to hear their perspective on the questions we just went through, which is, the subtle differences between the global patients and, the commercial in practice, how they see that they could let the physicians have, let them be open-minded to use this, historically quite dangerous treatment to squamous patients, because that would really affect the commercial success.
That shifts the dial in favor of,
Yeah.
Last week, there was this big deal between Pfizer and Innovent.
10 billion, yeah.
And certainly that was quite a milestone itself. What is this sort of Akeso and Summit, now that we have this sort of breakthrough in some ways with Yvonne, I need to say this word right, ivonescimab.
Ivonescimab.
Oh, okay.
I need to get used to saying that, right? How does it change? How do you think it changes the entire landscape here right now? Does it make China biotech more attractive in terms of M&A or even just acquisition targets? Like, how do you think this just changes the industry now and how they view China biotech?
Yeah, so I think the build-up of the deals as well as the new flood of results, they are very much in favor of the continued boom of China biotech. I think it's encouraging here to see it's not just one drug, one company, but rather a structural output, from China, the whole industry-wise. So we do see a lot of new collaborations, like the one between Innovent and Pfizer, and shortly before this was a Hengrui deal announced with BMS, also at the same scale. So this is something structural. And also, the ASCO results, we saw that lots of companies reported new data involving the new classes of drugs. So Akeso is a bispecific, which, Akeso is the leader in the space, but plenty of companies are chasing. Innovent is a good example. Innovent has their own bispecific. That's a different mechanism. So I think the result does add more, it makes it more incrementally positive that these new classes may really alter practices in the future. And what excites me the most is, again, the combination possibility between bispecifics and ADCs, which, in parallel, we see the rise of ADCs. So it's great news, definitely, for the global research community, great news for patients, and good news for Chinese companies.
I mean, we're up 10% on Akeso early going. I think we were up 6% on Friday. Do you think out-licensing deals this year will surpass last year's total?
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, already the first 4 months, we saw that it's at close to 40% of last year's total. Right. So momentum still ongoing. The latest 2 mega deals announced, I believe that we will have hit a 50% mark already.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't think it stops there. So earlier there was worry that policies may play a role, that there may be tightening policies. So far, we don't see any direct slowdown in terms of deals. I think the protective policy may have more to do with the core IP, the core technology enabling IP. But if we're talking about asset-based deals, right, individual products, out licensing, so far we don't see any slowdown in that.
Thank you so much for spending early Monday morning with us here. That was Rebecca Liang there, Bernstein, China Pharma and Biotech Senior Analyst. Right, we are, in fact, just to point out, we're just getting more, of course, from the company itself. The CFO will be joining us exclusively in the next hour of the China Show on the Times on your screens. Catch it very, very shortly. We'll leave you with a look at the early goings of Akeso. We're up 10% in the pre-markets. Lots more ahead. This is the China Show.
All right, your agenda here today, we do have the UK delegation. So the foreign minister is in China from the UK there today. We're also tracking some Meituan earnings. Maybe that could continue this whole kind of hardware versus software sort of side of things at trade, given just how we've seen some of the earnings from Baba and the like when it came to the e-commerce side of things, continue to see some softness there. We're watching very key levels on the CNY, on the CFEDs basket, right? Around the 100 level here. Does it lead to that sort of threshold to spark some of PBOC action? That's one thing to watch according to our Bloomberg intelligence. We have those news on Minimax and, of course, on that onshore listing. Akeso, we've been talking about. Lenovo getting another price target upgrade from Goldman. And, of course, we're still tracking the data, right? So we have the rating dog PMI coming out in just a few moments and Macau casino revenue coming through for the month of May, too.
Okay, let's go through the stocks very quickly in the early goings. We have a couple of seconds here. Akeso, last we checked, up 10%. So we just talked about that the CFO will be joining us in about 45 minutes or so. Stay tuned for that exclusive interview coming up. Minimax, let's bring that up. Indications are a listing perhaps in Shanghai. We're up 5% in the early goings, and Lenovo was up 25%, up 100% in May. And we are doing this in the early goings for once. We are rested on the fence on the back of that Goldman upgrade. We have lots more coming up. You're watching the China Show, including the opening bell. This is Bloomberg. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back. We're approaching the Monday open, 40 seconds away, and as you can see, A50 futures are pointing to the upsides, perhaps more early, at least in early goings, more upside onshore. We're waiting for the rating dog PMIs to come out on the back of the official data, which came out over the weekend, right smack at 50. In terms of the PMI numbers, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Apart from that, what anything else?
We were just joking in the break about how, either I need to get a medical degree or a PhD in medicine or get an engineering degree and learn about AI a bit more and go deep into the supply chain. It's blowing my brain this morning.
Yeah,
so,
coffee's not doing the job.
No, it's not, especially after a weekend. But yeah, Akeso, as we talked about, right? We'll talk about that breakthrough. We get the CFO, Ming Wang, joining us to talk about what happened, of course, at that ASCO conference in Chicago. And certainly, we're already seeing the Akeso stock is surging here this morning. Your onshore markets are doing this right now. Shanghai is flat with the CSI 300 seeing marginal gains here. Shenzhen's doing a little bit better. We talked about the oil price, right? So despite the fact that you have all these great tech headlines, Asia Tech is still going strong. even while we are seeing oil markets a little bit elevated, given some of the mixed signals that we're seeing about whether we have this deal between the U.S. and Iran or not. So that dynamic continues for another day. In terms of what really is outperforming, it still continues to be those winners, right? The CATLs of the world were up another 1%. Capricorn Tech, we're flat right now, but we'll continue to watch what happens with the chip space in China. It was flying last week and one of the key sort of big bright spots there. And then, of course, we're watching very closely what happens when it comes to the e-commerce side of things. Meituan comes out with earnings a little bit later on here today. But what we have seen from some of the rivals, JD, when it comes to Alibaba as well, it still continues to be quite competitive. So we'll see what Meituan has to say. Flip the boards and see how Hong Kong is doing. Of course, we've been tracking Minimax as well. So now, of course, the news that they might be seeking some sort of onshore listing here, that could actually add a bit more, of course, fodder and really something for those in the AI trade here. There you go. Minimax, we're up about 6.5%, 7% in Hong Kong there. So that is another good news, of course, for those AI pure plays once again. Take a look how when it comes to Lenovo, best month since 1999 already for Lenovo. You add Goldman Sachs now with their latest, raising that price target by 15%. Really talking about whether it's AI PCs, they seem to be the leader, and AI agent growth potential as well. Goldman says that's why they're upgrading the stock once again. What did you say? The stock doubled basically in a month.
100% in May.
Yeah. Another 5% today, Dave. And then, of course, there's Akeso. So, what happened was presented, certainly as we were talking to Bernstein about. So they've been able to at least say that those that took this drug, Yvonne, I think I'm saying it right.
Yes.
Was able to live 4 months longer than some of the traditional lung cancer drugs out there. So that certainly is a breakthrough. Whether this can translate and transfer to maybe more of a global sort of picture is certainly one question we'll be asking the CFO in the next hour.
From 24 to 28 months.
Yes.
There we go. I think we also just some context on the Lenovo story. If we had that ready, let's show that. If not, let's go to PMIs. But just to say, we're looking at... so on the Hang Seng China Index, Lenovo's building its gains there. I think we're up 150+% at this point in time for year to date. Okay, let's have a look at the PMIs, which came out over the weekend. So you have the official numbers, the actuals versus the survey on your screens. I'm not going to recap that, but maybe just more context here coming through shortly. Yeah, so when you take a look at that 50, we're still above an expansion, but then again, there does seem some softness here. We look under the hood. Let's bring in, of course, Goldman Sachs. Their latest data, they're saying that, it is a bit of a mixed picture. Let's bring in Chief China Economist Hui Shan joining us now. Your take on these numbers?
Thanks for having me. And over the weekend, we got these PMI numbers. I think it shows you a couple of things. One is that the Middle East conflict, the oil prices, they are having a negative impact on manufacturing. MBS statement explicitly said in some of these energy processing and chemical fibers, their industry level PMIs are lower. So we're seeing some of that. At the same time, I think the bigger picture, China's manufacturing still expanding, that hasn't changed that much. Because if you have that energy part of the story softening, but you're still getting the headline 50, that means the high tech, the equipment making, that part of the economy is still doing pretty well.
AI exports, talk to us about that.
Yeah, we just put out a report. What's really interesting, in this year's trade data for China is the very large increase in Chinese imports.
Yes.
It's about 25% year-on-year increase in Chinese imports. So what is really going on? We saw two drivers. One is gold. For some reason, Chinese gold imports increased significantly. That's harder to predict because it's lumpy and it is gold.
Is it PBOC, you think, you suspect?
No, PBOC purchases, that's from central bank. That's excluded
from the
account. Excluded from the customer's data. But the second is the semiconductors. So if you think about China's semiconductors, China is still very much reliant on foreign supply, right? Only 25% of the semiconductors used in China are self-made, whereas the rest is imported. So if you have a very large increase in semiconductor prices and quantity because of the AI boom, you are going to see more imports and that translates into deficit. But what we saw, we also don't want to over-exaggerate the impact of semiconductor imports on China's trade surplus because a lot of these semiconductor imports are being placed in EVs and home appliances, all these products. So the deficit on the semiconductor front is going to be partially show up in the surplus in, say, EV home appliance exports.
So do you think this is something of a temporary surge, the import side of things, or something that could actually really impact the trade balance now?
Yeah, I think in terms of the semiconductor story, in the near term, it will be a downward pressure on China's trade surpluses. Okay. After all, it's similar to oil, right? Yeah. If you're importing more than you export, then your terms of trade will deteriorate when the price of that product increases.
Okay, what's the outlook then? Because the March export numbers, I keep going back to that because it really surprised a lot of people, right? What is your expectation now, given the data on imports from April? How does that look over the next 6 months in terms of exports then?
So trade data right now, they are...
Is it too noisy is my question?
It's too noisy.
Okay.
In the first 4 months of the year, you got 3 months distorted by the Lunar New Year timing. So okay. I would look at it holistically. It's about 15% year-on-year up in the first 4 months of the year for Chinese exports. It's still quite decent, given what is happening. Now, at this point, what you want to watch is that whether, because the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, so whether that's going to translate into lower growth in Chinese trading partners, especially in the emerging markets, that could feed into softening in Chinese exports. But at the same time, we're also hearing from industry contacts that Christmas stocking up usually happens in August, September, but this year is being put forward just because the uncertainties and purchasers want to be prepared. So May, June, we could get a benefit from that changing in timing in terms of Christmas-related purchases.
Oh.
It seems to be all about a tech story. I mean, you take a look at what's going on in Taiwan, what's going on in Korea as well. How do you see the non-tech side of things in China looking right now? Especially, it still seems that the consumption side hasn't really seen any signs of really...
Especially the retail sales number for April.
Yeah.
Barely increasing.
And investment has also turned negative,
yes.
right? So
the domestic data, if anything, if you look at the past few years, that seems to be the trend. Exports are really strong, but domestic was weak. I think the April data shows you that divergence is even more dramatic. I like to use the data on the auto domestic sales down 20% year-on-year, but exports up 70% year-on-year. So that gives you a example of how different domestic versus exports have been. But I wouldn't be too worried. On the retail sales, it's barely increased 0.2% year-on-year. We knew that to some degree, right? Because we had that consumer goods trade-in program. Last May, we had home appliances sales up 50%, 50. So you will have a high base and retail sales will struggle given that high base. And on the investment front, yes, it has been weak, but we think of it as a sort of active choice rather than something a big negative shock happened. Because if you look at the bond issuance by the government, it has been super slow in April and May after a very strong first quarter. So our interpretation is that first quarter growth 5.0 at the upper end of the growth target. So therefore, policy deliberately slowed somewhat in the second quarter. For that reason, if they can slow it down, they can accelerate the bond issuance later on if needed. We're not too worried.
So how does the third quarter look if they deliberately took their foot off the gas in 2Q?
I think this is all reactive, right? If you ask what they're going to do, they're going to watch the Strait of Hormuz, the global market, export demand, and then calibrate what the appropriate responses should be. Okay. So I think this is, in some sense, it's not that surprising if they told you growth target 4.5 to 5. That's the range we're looking at.
Did we miss anything? What else do you think we should be talking about as we look into the second half of this year?
We are seeing the continued RMB appreciation. We talk about currency quite a bit on this show previously. What is really interesting, if you look at the interest rate differential, Chinese interest rate much lower than U.S. and other countries, but at the same time, RMB just continue to appreciate. We are getting a lot of questions from clients in terms of sustainability, how much it can appreciate. So we're forecasting, if we're sitting here this time next year, USD CNY goes to 650. So continued gradual appreciation is seems the most likely outcome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Nice to see you. Hui Shan there, Chief China Economist at Goldman Sachs. Yeah, that's something to watch. I think the CFET's basket at 101.3 is something that we're tracking here. Right, just ahead, massive weekends in terms of defense conversations at Shangri-La and the dialogues there. What wasn't mentioned, though, was Taiwan. Pete Hegseth becomes the first U.S. defense secretary in 10 years not to mention Taiwan in his speech at the major forum. We'll have lots more coming through on what took place over the weekend. This is the China Show.
There is rightful alarm regarding China's historic military buildup and the expansion of its military activities in the region and beyond. We share a clear-eyed assessment of that security environment and a mutual understanding that a Pacific dominated by any hegemon would unravel the regional balance of power and undermine the equilibrium we all seek to preserve.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth speaking at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, where he became the first Pentagon chief in more than a decade to avoid mentioning Taiwan. Let's bring in our China correspondent, Min Lo, on what this means. I mean, could this be seen as a win for President Xi?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that quote that we picked out there. That was the same quote that Chinese state media Global Times had pulled out as evidence of what they are calling U.S. prejudice towards China. But still, it's quite historic in the sense that this is probably one of the least confrontational speeches we had seen from a U.S. defense chief at the Shangri-La Dialogue. No mention of Taiwan, no mention of the South China Sea. So it seems like Hegseth is heeding that warning call from President Xi, right? A few weeks ago when Trump visited, President Xi gave this warning that a mishandling of the Taiwan issue could lead to clashes. So certainly something that Chinese state media is picking out, that notable shift in the tone. And what I think we want to track is whether there would be follow through in terms of, whether or not President Trump would continue to stall that $14 billion arms deal with Taiwan that we know has been on the docket.
The Americans are on board. Mm-hmm. American allies don't seem to be that on board with the Taiwan. What did we hear from the American allies?
Yeah, I think if Hegseth is trying to use this to convince allies to remain silent on Taiwan. He has not been very successful because we had seen some of these Asian allies being very outspoken, even provocative, you could say, especially when it comes to the Philippines Defense Secretary, who said that Taiwanese people can seek refuge in the Philippines in the event of an attack. And this follows what President Marcos Jr. earlier said about, how Philippines would get involved in the event of an attack on Taiwan as well, echoing the comments we had heard from Sanae Takaichi. We have the Japanese defense minister also talking about how it's strange for a country like China, with all the nuclear arsenal that they have, to accuse Japan of new militarism. And there was even a bit of a provocative moment in the Q&A segment where we have this senior colonel from China questioning the Japanese defense minister and asking why Japan has yet to apologize for the crimes in World War II, especially to some of the Asian victims in particular.
Okay, Min, thank you so much. Min Lo there, our China correspondent here. Just some breaking news. The private gauge PMIs are out. Let me just bring that up. A bit of weakness coming through in the Chinese currency. 51.8, slightly higher than estimates of 51.3. So this is going somewhat against the direction on the official numbers. We're still above 50. I think the key takeaway from Goldman Sachs on the official numbers is, despite the weakness we're seeing elsewhere, the numbers still held up above 50, which underscores the underlying strength that it perhaps might not be so obvious when you look at the headline numbers. Yeah, and as Hui Shan said, you look under the hood. I mean, AI exports and the like, and even just the surge in imports that we've seen of late certainly is something that she says could actually lead to a brief sort of temporary surge, you could say, for now, and really helping for the numbers here right now. Let's get you caught up, of course, what we're seeing after this Shangri-La dialogue. The Philippines is seeking closer ties with Taiwan and stronger military links with China's adversaries. Now, speaking exclusively to Bloomberg on the sidelines in Singapore, Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro said the move seeks to deter what he described as Beijing's nefarious practices in the South China Sea.
Well, definitely. It's spurred on by that because the sad lesson in Ukraine, for example, is that no country is immune from conflict. And deterrence really is an active endeavor, of which deterrence is a function of a country's own resilience. And if there still is an imbalance with a bigger aggressor or potential aggressor, then you have to leverage alliances in order to clad yourselves against the nefarious practices of an aggressor. And with the actors of the same persuasion around the world, it's pretty clear who they are, where they operate. In the Philippines, it happens to be China because of its expansionism in the West Philippine Sea. And it's so, the lesson of Shangri-La dialogue today is that conflicts in Europe and affect the Indo-Pacific, not only on the effects of the conflict, but also as to the direct or indirect participants in these conflicts.
We heard from President Marcos recently about how the Philippines is prepared to play a part if anything happens in Taiwan because it is a close neighbor. What role will the Philippines play in that?
First and foremost, the Philippines will secure its sovereignty and territorial integrity. So what role it plays depends on what China does. The Philippines' defense engagements and external relations are purely defensive by statutory fiat. And of course, by practicality too, we cannot afford involving ourselves into external forays. So it will be purely defensive and depends entirely on what we anticipate China to do to us. Secondly, it will also involve opening up our supply chains against and making sure that China does not close this. So these supply chains and sea lines of communication in order to secure whatever victory it wants. Thirdly, we have 200,000 Filipinos in Taiwan who may need to be repatriated, and we have to anticipate actions. Anticipation is a key to deterrence, and it is key to saving lives, and it is responsible for us to plan for contingencies. We cannot just wait passively to see what China does, although operative facts of China's overt behavior will determine where we go.
So what are the scenarios that have been planned with Taiwan?
No, not with Taiwan. We do not interoperate with Taiwan except perhaps on a humanitarian assistance and disaster response. Other departments are free to engage with Taiwan, but based on the One China policy, the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of National Defense are not allowed to engage with Taiwan.
When it comes to Japan, there seems to be a new military relationship. I mean, during his visit to Japan, President Marcos agreed with his counterpart in Japan to exchange intelligence, military intelligence. Why is that important at this time?
Well, it provides the operational security cladding for interoperability because information is one of the most precious assets one can have and a most potent asset that may fall into wrong hands. Secondly, we need the secrecy of information agreement in order to be a recipient or a purchaser of Japan defense equipment, of which the technology, of course, is in Japan's interest and the Philippine interests to remain confidential and secret.
Yeah, there we go. That was Gibo Chidoro there, the Defense Secretary of the Philippines, speaking exclusively, of course, to Bloomberg at the recently concluded Shangri-La conversations in Singapore. Right, we'll just leave you with a look at markets, and we'll unpack some of these massive moves we're seeing across the tech space. Still a lot in hardware, a lot across the region, plenty on that and more coming through. This is Bloomberg. Right, about an hour into the session in Taiwan, MediaTek is a stock that has been just going through the roof, and even more so today. That's ahead of Computex, JP Morgan, latest one to come out, raising their price target for the share price today. Speaking of share price, rethinking of re-rating, I think is a better term here. Goldman Sachs on Lenovo. We're up a further 7% on Lenovo today on the back of, again, 100% rally that we had back in May.
Yeah, it's nuts. We continue to see the re-rating continue for another day for this stock. So there you go. We talked about there's just so much going on. The Hong Kong software rally.
That's a different, yeah.
That's also been interesting as well, what we've been seeing. So there you go. King D International is up some 14%. I mean, you're seeing some pretty big moves when it comes to Kuaishou, SenseTime, and Kingsoft as well. So you're starting to see more rotation within the whole, China tech space here, apart from maybe some of the larger tech names, of course, and we're counting down to Meituan earnings coming up later on as well. Akeso, that's the one to watch, right? So this breakthrough that we saw, this announcement that they made when it came to this Chicago conference, right? We're giving up some of the gains already for Akeso, but certainly we're going to have the CFO, Bing Wang, talk a little bit more about this lung cancer drug. Really, and the technological breakthroughs they made with that one.
Yep, so stay tuned for that interview. It takes place in about 15 minutes or so. In fact, yep, the CFO is joining us for the landmark address there at the major U.S. Cancer Summit. Bing Wang, in a couple of moments, as you see on your screens, will be joining the second hour of the China Show. On top of that, lots more of stocks, Baidu, Minimax, lots more ahead. This is the China Show.
Welcome back to the China Show. A look at the CSI 300 just a half hour into the session, and we are continuing to see around session highs here right now, but we're only talking about a fifth of 1%. Offshore seems to be doing better. Look at MSCI China. We're up some 0.9% here. We talked about there's a bit of a software rally that's going on in Hong Kong here today, but there's no shortage of tech news, right? We're counting down to Jensen Huang, set to speak in Computex in Taipei. You talk about what we've been seeing, upgrades when it comes to MediaTek, upgrades when it comes to Lenovo from the sell side, and then you have the likes of SoftBank building data centers in France. I mean, there's just a lot to really cling your teeth to. Oh, Minimax as well. They could be listing onshore. Yes, on the star market, right? On the back of CXMT, of course, which is a big news last week, and of course, not to mention to Baidu because of Kunlun Xin. Yes. And reports there that it could soon be listing here in Hong Kong as early as June, as based on some of these reporting. The story across these markets, as we were just talking about there, it's everything but the greater Chinese markets, at least on a benchmark basis. We talked about the run we're seeing in Hong Kong software as an example, and I guess caveat there. Asia Pacific up 1%. Japan is better by about 1% as we go into the 30 minutes mark going into the break. Korea is doing a Korea thing again. As you can see, we're up 4%. Within that, of course, LG Electronics. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Taiwan, some of the big movers there. Let's get that up, please, if we can, ahead of Computex. But I think the dinner and some of the photos that emerged from the dinner, really enough for markets and investors to look at the picture and then determine their stock picks for the day, I guess. I was going to say, if you want to find a picture of this screen right now, take a look at this one, right? This is how it translates to CEO headshots. Yeah, and they're calling it the $1 trillion banquet that happened over the weekend here with Jensen Huang, meeting, of course, with all their Taiwanese partners, right? And you take a look at really who was seated. Hopefully we have the pictures of them just sitting in the front row. It's the stars, right? You talk about TSMC's C.C. Wei. You talk about Barry Lam from Quanta. You talk about when it comes to MediaTek, Asus, Wistron, all in the front row there, seated with Jensen. What a night. Be a fly on the wall. I wonder who paid, though. Had to be Jensen, right? I mean, they can all pitch in and they would do okay. Yeah. So again, this is like the supply chain conversation that's taking place. It actually looks like a modern day tech overlay of The Godfather. He is like that wedding photo from The Godfather. Remember when they did that? That looks eerily similar to this. Modern day, of course, in terms of. I mean, the leather jacket helps. I mean, it's hot in Taiwan too. For him to still pull that off.
Well, it's.
But then again,
it's the look.
If you look at the data, it really just goes to show that this build out in AI is continuing on in a really big way. Whether it's Korea, whether it's Taiwan, just check out the numbers we got from the trade data from Korea this morning.
Crazy.
Right? When you're talking about the fastest pace of export growth we've seen since 1984, I think some of us weren't even born around that time. Taiwan, there you go, also came out with numbers. Right, expected projections for this year in terms of exports is close to 40%.
Generational numbers, right?
Structural, as some have said.
And I think accompanying the Taiwan projection was also the growth forecast of, let's round up to 10%, which is perhaps the second year that we'll get double-digit growth from an economy, right? That's not something you don't normally see. So it is playing out and showing up across the macro numbers. And it's something that is really giving investors a lot of reasons to ignore warnings of short-term overheating.
Yeah. Oil prices that are elevated.
Or prices elevated, weak macro in some places as well. In fact, maybe a hedge against the weak macro. Let's bring in our team to discuss all of this. Joining us here on set, Winnie Xu, our Asia equities reporter, and of course, our markets reporter, Anthony Stephens, is here with us. Anthony, let me start with you. You've been watching this cohort for a while in Taiwan. Just tell us what this is.
Right. There are 30 stocks in Taiwan that are up over 200%, right? And remember, back in the day, we could put a computer together ourselves, maybe, right? Today, there is no hope of that. The complexity in putting these chips to work is what is driving these gains. You have stuff that is including the chip onto the circuit board, so circuit board makers, substrate makers, capacity makers. Taiwan does all of this, right? And all these names are up 200%, led by most recently the circuit board makers. So it is very, very difficult to create a circuit board that fits some of these AI chips. It's not just the AI chip. The AI chip has to connect to memory. It has to connect to processors like the CPU, GPU. This is a sector that Taiwan completely dominates, and it's actually very difficult to do. And the gains are actually coming down to like the atomic level. It's a level of complexity that Taiwan dominates, that it's also its retail population understands better than most. So an important thing to note about this is Taiwan is still a net sell for the year from foreigners, right? So it's the retail that have crushed this market by understanding the tech deeply, and that very educated population is reaping the benefits of a second year of growth. You guys mentioned 2 years running. Actually, a lot of these names are up 800% plus over 2 years.
Wow. Winnie, you've also been writing about this wave of IPOs that are coming, right? Whether it's SpaceX, Anthropic, OpenAI. What sort of tailwinds do you think that could provide for Asia?
Yeah, actually, I have to give credit to Anthony because it was originally his idea.
Team effort.
Exactly. So we really did dig into how this is going to provide the next tailwind. And for example, the strategist at IG actually did an estimate and say that these IPOs combined likely going to bring an upside of about $60 billion in terms of AI spending on top of $650 billion that's already being estimated into these hyperscalers already. So the idea is that, the funds that they're raising, they can be trickled down into the AI spending that can further benefit the AI supply chain in Asia. Yes, we talked about these big names, Samsung, SK Hynix, and TSMC, but we're really seeing that broadening out right now. Anthony just now mentioned lots of Taiwanese names, but I'd like to also highlight the Japanese names that we're talking about. The MLCCs, Taiyo Yuden and Murata jumping some 100% in the past month or so. So you're really seeing that trade broadening out in Asia.
In terms of the bottlenecks, I know everyone's chasing it. You've been chasing. What are the next potential bottlenecks then?
Right now, I think it moves to getting these data centers built, right? Like you have to actually break the ground. You have to build this stuff. They have to be powered. They have to be cooled. And now we're heading into a very hot, Asian summer. So a lot of these things are really up for grabs, right? Like the power, for example, today, amidst the China boredom, you're seeing the battery sector doing really well. And China is a big exporter of this kind of battery technology. In Korea, you've seen the battery sector do really well as well. So no matter what your politics around renewable energy is, whether you're in the US or China or Europe, renewable energy and the batteries around that seem to be the consensus on what is going to power these data centers. That seems to be the next leg.
Winnie, what are you hearing on bottlenecks? Same question.
Yeah, so I think based on our reporting so far, I think the one that gets the most vote is actually power, because these data centers require so much power. But what we're hearing is that the build out of the grids is just not accelerating fast enough to meet that demand. So that's why we're seeing investors positioning further into some of these power names. And these names in Korea actually are some of the top performers recently as well.
In terms of risks, I mean, what are they, right? Because it seems like too much of a good thing right now. What are people telling you?
So I feel like there kind of is a debate right now. Some are saying that these IPOs actually mark a potential, the potential kind of wall or the ceiling of this rally, just because how far things have run already. But some of the other key risk is first profitability. If these demand are actually going to be able to generate profit, the obvious ones, but also the macro risk is still there. We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz being closed for 3 months already, and South Korea and Japan rely so much on that helium import from the Middle East as well. So these are some of the bottlenecks when it comes to resources are also something that we're closely watching out for.
Anthony, final word, 10% up on SoftBank. It's now bigger than Toyota. One by one, these OGs are going.
Yeah.
Yep.
What do you make of that?
It's the growth multiplier, right? Yeah. What is Toyota going to grow at that can potentially catch SoftBank, right? So like we talked about earlier, people are getting paid to dream, right? And there is no dream in the old names, right? In Toyota, you don't have to pick on Toyota. You can pick on any industrial name that is not related to AI. Right? You are actually seeing industrial names do fine as long as they're related to AI. So, for example, Komatsu, which is involved in excavating these sites for data centers, that's doing really well.
Yeah.
So, investors are chasing growth in an environment that is looking to outpace inflation. Right? It's the inflation narrative that is driving this seeking for risk. Until that changes, you will not see these. Essentially, SoftBank is a very large AI hedge fund. Right? You will not be able to be a normal company that outpaces SoftBank.
There we go, without the expense ratio there. Anthony Stephens and Winnie Xu there. I mean, the fact that you have an entire economy tied to AI that's growing quicker than non-AI companies like Toyota, and Taiwan is an example of that, just underscores where you get the multiple from. Okay, just ahead, speaking of healthcare, it's another place, of course, that has delivered some alpha in the past. It's sort of consolidated this year. At Akeso, of course, I think we're up still 8%. The CFO joins us on the big weekend that they just had. Lots more ahead. This is The China Show.
Why Akeso is the most important one? Because for the many years, so we got a lot of the criticism and also speculation regarding China data. Why? Because previously a lot of the data was a pure comparison with chemo or maybe placebo. But for the very first time, Akeso is the first and only one bold enough to do a head-to-head comparison with Keytruda. Keytruda is the bestseller in human history. So that's the idea why, even if this is a China-only data, still global physicians, global investors, they care a lot about this data.
It'll be interesting to hear their perspective on the questions we just went through, which is, the subtle differences between the global patients and, the commercial in practice, how they see that they could let the physicians have, let them be open-minded to use this, historically quite dangerous treatment to squamous patients, because that would really affect the commercial success.
That was, Cui, the Jefferies head of Asia Healthcare Research, who joined us on Friday, and Rebecca Liang out of Bernstein, who joined us about an hour back on China's Akeso, which has presented evidence to a major U.S. oncology summit over the weekend. Its lung cancer treatment extended patients' lives in a late-stage trial. And just for numbers, in case you missed that, it went for 24 months, extended by 4, statistically significant to 28 months. Joining us now is the company's CFO, Bing Wang, joining us exclusively from Chicago. Big weekend for you guys there. How do you guys feel? And maybe we can talk about what's next here. But yes, take us through what happened over the weekend here.
Great. Thank you. First of all, thank you, David, Yvonne, for having me. This weekend has been awesome. I think we First of all, it's a packed conference, and we take a lot of pride in that. I think we're the first Chinese company to have a late-breaking abstract at the plenary session, so we take a lot of pride in that. But most of all, I think the audience, at least I was there in person, the audience in person, was very happy to see the results. Now, obviously, not only ours, but many other results, but every one of these results create real benefit for patients' lives. So, and we're obviously a big part of that. So the conference has been fantastic, and we're very, very, I would say, take a lot of pride and grateful to be part of this conference and with our data.
Yeah, I mean, you're wearing the ASCO, the summit sort of hat. I think you need a Akeso hat soon, Bing Wang. There's a caveat, though. I mean, some of the sell side said that this trial was conducted only in China. How transferable do you think these results are really to maybe more Western populations? And are you seeking for that U.S. trial to happen?
Oh, we think the results is very transferable. I think you have to put this trial in the context that this is our fourth success, right? We have Harmony A, which again is approved in China. This is for second-line treatment for patients that already have a target therapy, EGFR inhibitor. We also have Harmony 2, which is approved in China. This is a monotherapy, but first-line treatment. And also our partner in Summit have really good data, right, in Harmony. So, definitely what we saw from Harmony and Harmony A, there's a lot of consistency in the efficacy and safety profile between a China-focused trial and a more broader global study. So I think if you take that into context and the fact that, this is our fourth, I would say, success. And earlier we had PFS data, progression-free survival data, and now we have overall survival data. And this is, again, like I said, the fourth study that we've shown success. I think we have a lot of confidence that this could benefit for patients worldwide and not just in China.
Right. And how soon do you think your partner, correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of the settings here, Summit could then file for the trial in the U.S.?
Well, again, these are data-driven decisions, and Summit have given their press release on guidelines, so I don't want to speak on their behalf, but they're doing a fantastic job recruiting, executing, enrolling the study, and in their study it both includes a type of lung cancer called squam, which is our study, and also non-squam. So they are doing a really good job and tracking on time, so I think we have a lot of confidence in the ability to deliver on the timeline.
You mentioned about some of these other ongoing trials. There is one ongoing one, Harmony 3, which is a global trial right now, Bing Wang. How does this latest data then coincide or align with that? And is there an expected sort of readout timeline for that too?
Yeah, so as there's a lot of similarity to the extent for the two studies. Obviously, ours is in China, and our control uses a leading PD-1 called tislelizumab, whereas the Harmony 3 study uses pembrolizumab. They're both very, very good PD-1s and standard of care for non-small cell lung cancer first line. So I think the consistency is there in both in terms of the control that we use, very similar, as well as in the trial design, which is very similar. And then so obviously we have the benefit of starting our studies earlier. We have the benefit of the fact that we're recruiting in China, which is a lot more patients, and so the enrollment is fast in general. We do a very good job. They do a very good job, but we do it in a much bigger, patient population, larger hospitals. But other than that, I think the transferability of the readout is fairly consistent, and this data that we just presented today actually gives us a lot of confidence into Summit's ability to deliver on their study as well in Harmony 3.
A lot of it comes down to how you convince the doctors at the front line to deploy your drug. And not to ask you specifically on competition, I'll just mention Keytruda, for example. If all goes well, do you think this displaces what's currently in the market?
We think so. It might take some time, but we think so because there's a clear evidence of efficacy while having very manageable safety profile. So to give you an example, in China, as I mentioned earlier, right, we already have approval in 2024 for a second-line treatment. We got approval last year for first-line treatment. And in China, over 70,000 patients in real-world settings have already benefited from this drug. So this is not just a clinical study that we're presenting, right? You have to look at it holistically. This is the third phase 3 study.
Right.
The third one in China, but the fourth one overall. Over 70,000 people in China in rural setting have used this, and we have seen consistent efficacy and safety profile across the board. So, we feel very confident. Now, the competition, I think, when I was on the show a few months ago, I mentioned that, we have 4 phase 3 and the rest of the world combined has 0. That is still true today. So in terms of the competition, I think they're obviously, they see our data. They're, obviously this is a class of drug that's bispecific that's very, very compelling. So I would say, imitation is the best form of flattery. So the fact that they want to also follow our footsteps and develop this is fantastic. I think patients will benefit worldwide. But at the end of the day, our lead, especially in lung cancer, is so significant that we believe that our ownership of, or our market share, our future market share of lung cancer will be very similar to that of pembrolizumab and nivolumab in lung cancer in the PD-1 space. So we're very confident that we will be the dominant player in this class of drugs.
What does this data tell you, Bing-Wan, about really ivonescimab's commercial potential? Where do you see the upside, and what is it?
Oh, well, so, you think about non-small cell lung cancer, right? There's you have different lines of treatment, and you have, depending on the patient's genetic profile. So, for example, in China, our first approval is a second-line treatment for patients that have progressed after they got a type of drug called EGFR inhibitors. So patients with driver mutations, a lot of times the doctor prescribed that. And since that was our first approval, it's approved for second line, and it's shown, it worked out very well. The second approval we got was actually first-line treatment, but it was a monotherapy, which is important for a lot of, I would say, older patients that probably don't want to use chemo. But a larger portion of the population overall in both, I would say, China and globally, are to use combination of PD-1 with chemotherapy. And that is the therapeutic combination, PD-1 and therapy, that we just beat handedly in the presentation today. So I think the market potential of this will be very, very significant. We already have I would say, commanding lead, and I think we just added to that lead in a very meaningful way today.
Perhaps no better source of helping us understand the risks than yourself. The direction of travel seems clear as the case you've just laid out. What risks are you looking to manage specifically in the process here?
Sure, very good question. I think obviously these studies. The reason we do these studies is to demonstrate the data, right? So I think Harmony. I'll tell you, we just did Harmony 6. We showed very, very good data. We're very looking forward to our partner Summit's data as well. And like I said, until it reads out, it hasn't read out yet. But again, we have a lot of confidence there. And then the other part is we are investing significantly in our manufacturing. So right now we have the capacity to make everything we need in China. We have the capacity to make everything that Summit will need in their initial commercial launch. But we are also increasing our manufacturing in China to go beyond that, right? I think we have a lot more folks in China that will use ivonescimab. When this particular indication in the data, which is again ivonescimab in combination with chemo, gets approved, hopefully very soon. And also when Summit start to add many additional indications, right? Because keep in mind that we have phase 3 trials, first line phase 3 trials in a number of other cancers that are very, very significant in size, right? Whether it's colorectal, first line triple negative, first line head and neck, first line biliary tract cancer, first line pancreatic cancer. So as these start to get approved, there'll be a lot of demand for our drug. And so far, we've seen that we are the best drug out there. So we want to make sure that our investment into our manufacturing capacity can meet with all this new demand from both ourselves and also from our partner Summit. We're very confident we can do that. But again, this is one where we're putting a lot of effort to make sure that all the patients that need the drug can get it.
Ming Huang, thank you so much for the time and staying up for us. And of course, enjoy your time in Chicago there. That was the CFO at Akeso. We do have some breaking news. It's crossing the terminal here right now. This is according to Yonhap News, a local media in Korea that's reporting about explosion at the Hanwha Aerospace in the country. We believe this is the Daejeong facility where this occurred. That's all we know at this point. We'll bring you the details once we know more. But yes, an explosion reported at the Hanwha Aerospace in Korea. This is Bloomberg.
Right. Let's just have a look at U.S. futures as we go into a fresh trading week. And of course, the tailwinds coming through are blowing quite strongly still, obviously, from last week. We're feeling that in the cash markets in the Asia Pacific. It's worth pointing out that a lot of markets are shut today across ASEAN in particular. But we are looking at still the AI plays in the region doing the heavy lifting, really the lifting you need. NASDAQ futures are up 0.5%. We'll have more ahead. This is Bloomberg.
11:29 a.m. in Tokyo. Japanese markets are heading to that lunch break in just a moment, but we continue to see, equity gains that continue to edge further here. We're up about 1% in the Nikkei 225. SoftBank certainly has lifted a lot of things after their announcement that they are going to be building data centers in France. So I think it's one of their biggest pushes yet into Europe when it comes to that AI build out. So certainly that's one thing that's moving Japan here this morning. The TOPIX is on the opposite end of that, and we're still pretty weak when it comes to the dollar-yen trade. 159 for the yen here right now.
Yeah, and in fact, that was enough to lift SoftBank above Toyota.
Yeah.
Intraday. So we'll see how we close, of course, in terms of market cap. So surpassing a real OG in the market in Japan, which has been, of course, there. And I guess the share price divergence today underscores that point. We're up 1.4% on MSCI Asia Pacific. We talked about U.S. futures. The dollar is actually stronger as we speak. So this rally is taking place against the backdrop of somewhat still counter-current as far as risk assets go in the form of a stronger dollar today. Flip the page, please. In terms of sector movers, IT is still the place to be. Within that space, we're looking at 3.6%. First row, leftmost side of your screens. And, sometimes that's all you need. And often enough, recently, that's all we needed as far as lifting this Asian benchmark. Okay. Let's talk about what's happening in the latest here as far as Iran is concerned. So Washington and Tehran have traded messages seeking changes to a draft agreement that would extend their ceasefire and reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. In a post on Truth Social, President Trump says the proposed deal states Iran will not have a nuclear weapon.
Meanwhile, Israel is expanding its incursion into Lebanon, targeting Iranian ally Hezbollah. Now, Israel is not party to the talks between the U.S. and Iran, and it's not clear whether it will agree to stop its parallel war in Lebanon if the Iran conflict is resolved. Now, of course, the Middle East situation was at the center of the Shangri-La dialogue that took place in Singapore this weekend. We heard from several senior defense officials from across the region.
We really need to, I feel, double down on the architecture of the global rules-based order. It's totally different to how we would have imagined this 10 years ago. So it's reshaping our defence force, but I think it's reshaping defence forces around the world.
Well, certainly we're anxious to see that peace and stability can be brought forward as soon as possible. And then from a New Zealand point of view, we will think if there are contributions that we can make to ensure freedom of navigation and other aspects of a more normal return to the rules-based order will be possible.
This is not something new because we faced that back in 1987, 88, after the Iran-Iraq war. I mean, freedom of navigation, the Strait of Hormuz free, clear of mind, it's something that, it's in everybody's interest. European nation, the coalition of the willing, which is the way we call them, it's ready to do to help whenever there will be the condition in being able to intervene, and that's something that I'm expecting.
Although we try to see that there should be no gap in the defense this acquisition or what other countries have in their arsenal. This war teaches that we can adopt the asymmetrical warfare in dealing with countries which have unequal strength or arsenal in their defense. So Malaysia is also looking at that, using the asymmetrical, adopting the asymmetrical warfare approach.
And U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was speaking at the Shangri-La Forum in Singapore, where he did sought to convince U.S. allies that staying quiet on Taiwan is the best way to project American strength. Let's bring in our China correspondent, Min Lo, on what we can glean from the tone from Hegseth's speech.
Yeah, his tone was really quite different from last year, where he struck a more, I guess, a hostile tone at the time, where he talked about how the China threat is very imminent and real, and the PLA was rehearsing for, quote, the real deal. But this time, in his 30-minute speech, he made no mention of Taiwan, no mention of South China Sea, and really sort of heeding that warning from President Xi, right, when he met with Trump just a few weeks ago in Beijing, saying that there would be clashes if the Taiwan issue is not handled properly. And I think one major caveat is that Pete Hegseth did say when he spoke to reporters that this by no means signal that there is a change in the Taiwan policy. But what has changed, he said, is that the U.S. should speak softly while wielding a big stick. So I think China will still be very vigilant about whether there will be follow-through, particularly on that $14 arms sale to Taiwan that has been stalled so far.
And how is it being covered in state media?
So state media is certainly taking note of the tone and how it has softened from previous years, and in fact pointing to how this is a win for China in a sense, saying that it is a recognition of China's governance wisdom, and at the same time also not missing an opportunity to take a dig at Taiwan as well, saying that Hegseth's speech essentially has left the DPP party in Taiwan visibly embarrassed, and it's a reminder for those pro-independence separatist forces that they need to face the reality if they are still thinking about continuing to rely on the U.S.
Meanwhile, it's interesting, right? When you talk about the China defense minister not being able to attend, what message do you think China was sending?
Yeah, I think this is interesting because it's the second time in a row, and we say 3 years would be a pattern, so certainly something to watch for next year if he would skip this meeting again. But it seems like China is perhaps trying to dismiss the importance of the Shangri-La dialogue and trying to elevate their own version of the Shangri-La dialogue, which is the Xiangshan Forum in Beijing, right? And by being absent here, they perhaps are putting more pressure on other leaders to travel to Beijing to attend the Xiangshan Forum if they want to engage in a sort of diplomatic, military diplomacy with China. And we know that China in the past has expressed criticism of the Shangri-La dialogue for providing a platform to Western leaders to smear China in a way. So, of course, holding it in Beijing would give them more control as well.
That's exactly something that our guest on Friday to preview this actually said. Wang Dong actually mentioned it. It's there's a conference, I think early May, though, is the Xiangshan conference there. Min, thank you so much. Fantastic. Min Lo, our China correspondent there. Germany's defense chief, just staying in theme here, says that while Europe is rushing to rearm, it needs time and clarity from the U.S. to do so. We spoke with Carsten Breuer at the Shangri-La Dialogue, and he also told us that China missed a big opportunity by not sending senior military officials to Singapore.
It's my first time I've seen the Chinese delegations on big numbers and also on small numbers. What it's important for me is always that the dialogue is keeping up, that we are able to talk, that we are able to communicate. The size of the Chinese delegation is very small this time, and it's also very low ranked. So I think China is missing an opportunity here to talk within the region, but also to other partners, to other militaries, to other politicians.
Let's talk about Europe. He was pretty critical of Europe. He was praising the Asian allies. I guess the numbers don't really add up because Europe has ramped up its defense spending. What else do you think Europe can do to kind of bridge the gap and perhaps reverse that relationship with the U.S.?
Well, hearing the speech from Secretary Hegseth yesterday, I was probably leaning a little bit back, only a little bit, because what he offers as limits, as lines where we have to go, I must say we are fulfilling this with the German military, with the German army. So the defense spending in Germany is at this stage. We are ramping up enormously. When Secretary Hegseth last year was here, he was talking about even Germany is doing this. We understood the message. We understood what we have to do, and it's not only Germany, it's also other countries.
Are you concerned about capabilities gap? We know that Europe has said that it will be able to defend itself by the end of the decade. I'm just wondering, in the meantime, where are the vulnerabilities? Where are the capabilities gaps? Some say nuclear could be an area.
For me, it's important that we are in a dialogue about this. So when we are talking about capabilities, we need a roadmap. It's clear that the U.S. is seeing their main effort now here in this region. But what we have to do is, if they're taking capabilities out, we have to mitigate those capabilities. So it has to be clear, it has to be transparent, and there has to be a roadmap in what time frame we have to do it. So this is a kind of a little bit of a European dilemma. What we are facing. We have all understood that we have to take care of our security on our own, that we have to take over more responsibility, but we can't build up the needed capabilities that fast like it is necessary. So this process has to be designed, it has to be steered. On this priority, it's ISR, which is on top of the list. It's capabilities in the airspace. It's capability in space. It's of course air defense. What is in there? It's digitalization, where we have to get much more ahead of what we are doing. So multi-domain operations comes to mind. It's deep precision strike weapons or long-range fires. So this is the top priorities, if you will. So, but I'm a little bit reluctant to talk about priorities, because priorities, when you set priorities, you probably don't look into what is necessary. So we have an underspending in defense budget over years and years. So we have to fill the gap, to build up a baseline, and then starting from there.
And that was Germany's Chief of Defense, Carsten Breuer, speaking with Haas there at the Shangri-La Dialogue. Now coming up, HSBC is stepping up its efforts to revive its flagging Hong Kong investment bank as competition intensifies. More details coming up next. This is Bloomberg. Now, here are some corporate stories that we're tracking for you today. Berkshire Hathaway will acquire Taylor Morrison Home Corp for $6.8 billion in an all-cash deal. It's a conglomerate's first major purchase under Chief Executive Greg Abel, and the offer of $72.50 per share is at a 24% premium to the home builder's Friday closing price. Taylor Morrison CEO Cheryl Palmer will continue to lead the company. Asia's largest low-cost carrier, Indigo, has reported an unexpected quarterly loss amid costs and operational disruptions linked to the Middle East conflict. The net loss of $267 million compared with analyst expectations for a profit of $197 million. Indigo booked a foreign exchange loss of over $500 million in the quarter as the rupee sank more than 5%. And China has appointed Ding Xuanqun to lead its top financial regulator. Ding is the first woman to be appointed as the head of the National Financial Regulatory Administration, and she replaces Li Yunze, who was removed following reports of a corruption investigation. Ding was previously in charge of the People's Insurance Company of China.
Okay, let's talk about this other big story we're tracking today. So HSBC is, this, redoubling efforts to revive its Hong Kong investment bank, ramping up hiring and deal-making after the sweeping overhaul, of course, that led to some fairly senior and high-profile departures. Let's bring in Manuel Baigori, who leads our Asia-Pacific deals coverage, to really tell us what's going on and what is HSBC trying to achieve this time around.
Yes, Davy and Yvonne. HSBC has been a pretty remarkable story. It has kept us super busy the last few years, because if you look back, it was a pretty dormant, stable shop for quite some time. Yet the last 2-3 years being anything but. I mean, they've been firing a lot of people. They've been reorganizing left and right. Just remember last year when they were kind of like reorganizing the whole international investment banking part, right? Like eliminating the US and Europe, just people trying to make sense of it. Investment bankers, the HSBC also couldn't make a lot of sense out of that move, and also clients. So that, I think, got people quite intrigued by what it meant strategically. Now, if you ask me, they've been busy on their own deals. I mean, just think about Hong Kong or Asia more broadly. I mean, they did the Hansen deal just a few months.
Yeah.
That was pretty chunky. They've been streamlining their portfolio. They just sold the Indonesian retail part of it to OCBC. That was interesting. They're selling other bits and pieces. So they're busy on their own deals. But now, when it comes to the franchise, I think people are still trying to figure out, okay, where does HSBC stand in the big arena for deal making, right? Because if you are a client doing, say, a cross-border deal, you may want a bank who can support you internationally, right? I mean, HSBC has pivoted a lot into Asia, that's clear. But then when it comes to cross-border deals, they risk missing out on some of those, right? Say Hutchinson is doing something cross-border in the UK, or is doing a big IPO, as it's been reportedly considering for Watsons, for instance. So I think what remains to be seen is how HSBC will fit in the international arena when all the banks have been building out and keeping up. And HSBC has been retrenching, right? So that is still a little bit too early to see the full impact on that. But for now, in all transparency, we've seen them, missing out on some of the important deals, but they also pop in some deals here and there, both on the M&A and the IPO front.
That's right.
So where are they trying to hire or rehire? I mean, what are sort of the plans that they're looking at right now?
I think, Yvonne, they are being very, very strategic, very, very selective. For the time being, they're being quite constrained. So if you look across teams, they've lost some real heavy hitters, across TMT, industrials, FIG. I mean, it's just really across sectors. They've kept some of them here and there. And they also have some very senior people still running their franchise, right? So it's not that it's completely vanished, but obviously, their capacity is smaller. So now the question is, how can they adapt to that? Yes, they will be more nimble, but at the same time, they think they've lost a little bit of their international capacity.
Manuel, thank you. Manuel Melgori there, who leads our Asia Pacific deals coverage on this whole HSBC and really these plans to hire again amidst this restructuring. Of course, you can get an insider's guide to the money and people shaking up the finance hub in our Hong Kong edition newsletter. That's out every Thursday. You can sign up. Just scan that QR code on your screen there, or just go to our website, Bloomberg.com/newsletters.
Right, welcome back. Just an update here on the breaking news this hour out of Yonhap news concerning Hanwha Aerospace and this explosion that was reported. That we have now slightly more information, but there's still a lot that we don't know, including we don't know whether there have been any casualties. I'll correct myself if I'm just getting that one incorrectly at this point in time. So fire authorities received about 30 emergency calls. Let's call it about 50 minutes back, about this large explosion and heavy smoke from the site in Daejeon City. Firefighters are currently conducting suppression operations at the scene, and we understand, of course, apart from that, do any other details stand out to you?
No, I mean, that's really all that we know at this point. So firefighters are still there at the scene right now, and they're saying they suspect a propellant-related explosion.
Yeah.
and will investigate the cause after this fire is extinguished. That's according to that Yonhap report that came out a few moments ago. So you are seeing when it comes to the stock has reversed some of the initial gains here on the back of this news. Of course, still lacking some details, but we'll bring you the latest once we do hear a little bit more. Meanwhile, we have actually spoken previously before this to Hanwha Aerospace, and they have been accelerating production at home and expanding its manufacturing footprint in Europe and the U.S. Speaking to us at the Shangri-La Dialogue, their global chief strategy officer told us that they're seeing demand for weapon systems outstripping supply.
I think it's important to note the driver of this. I mean, the recent conflicts in recent years, whether it's in Ukraine or the current one in Iran, really shows the need and the necessity for militaries around the world to increase productive capacity and stockpiles of munitions. That is a lesson they've learned from Ukraine and Iran. And another driver of this is then the increased defense spending that we're seeing globally.
Who are the new customers you're speaking with?
Well, Hanwha, as you know, is a Korean company. We, for a long time, have been the top defense contractor in Korea, and we have a robust export business around the world. But our model now, what we're really pushing to do now, is to become multinational, to move productive capacity, not just from the Korean Peninsula, not just do it in Korea, but do it in Europe, do it in the United States. So I spend a lot of my time in European capitals. I spend a lot of my time, I'm based in D.C., having conversations with the U.S. military, having conversations with existing customers like Poland and Romania, and possible new customers from Germany to the U.K., about how we can, what systems do they need, what type of defense systems, but also where can we place new productive capacity, leverage workforce, create new partnerships in these economies to have that productive capacity.
The medium-range missile, your MSAM, has been in focus. Are you getting new demand from any countries? Are you in conversations for deliveries?
And to be clear, our MSAM and our LSAM, they're two different missile defense systems that are integrated, and they, these have been employed on the Korean Peninsula for some time. They really are high-end and advanced systems, and we do share that with customers in global markets. It's high-performing. We have gotten inquiries, but again...
Where from? Who from? And how big an order are we looking at?
I think the inquiries are really arising from, again, the conflicts that we've been seeing and how important missile defense is to the defense and deterrence ability of militaries worldwide. And as we referenced earlier, demand is outstripping supply.
Our conversation there, of course, with Hanwha Aerospace, that was the Global Chief Strategy Officer, Alex Wong, with, of course, that's Linda at the Shangri-La Dialogue. Very briefly, before we wrap up the show today, so three names we're tracking very closely. Akeso on the back of this milestone that they hit, of course, with the data that they presented over the weekend at the American Oncology Conference. Shares are up 4.3. The CFO who joined us this hour says he is confident that the direction of travel is clear, that they will become the dominant player in this space, all things considered.
Yeah, when he talked about that this was only a trial that was done only in China, and he said, look, he thinks that what they've got is transferable to the U.S. or in Western populations. They are doing multiple sorts of similar trials at the same time. So for them, the gold standard, as some analysts have told us, is Keytruda. They're saying, it might take a while, but they believe that they're maybe onto something and trying to possibly displace that traditional sort of therapy. So certainly the analysts are liking that. Traders are liking that as well. We're up some 4%. Lenovo, of course, once again, continues to be a sort of a parabolic sort of story, right? Another 3% gains there. Goldman lifting the price target, really talking about this whole AI agent growth potential, and Minimax as well, right? So news that they are seeking some sort of onshore listing here, and really as they take on rivals like DeepSeek. But there you go, the stock down some 9% today in Hong Kong.
What you would expect anyway from a listing. Anyway, that's it from our shows here today. We have lots more come through as well on Bloomberg Television, Insights. Of course, with Linda Amen is coming up next. Lots more on the way. This is Bloomberg.